On to Sri Lanka now. After the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa lifted the state of emergency, the parliament session began earlier today. Despite widespread resistance and growing calls for the president to step down, Gotabaya Rajapaksa will not resign. The Highways Minister, Johnston Fernando, was responding to the opposition's criticism when he said that 6.9 million people voted for the president and that the president will not resign. The Parliament Speaker Mahinda Yapa Abeywardena has also reportedly ruled out the possibility of the Parliament asking Gotabaya Rajapaksa to step down. The Speaker said it was up to the people who elected the President to decide. Meanwhile, the opposition declined to join hands with the government for an interim government. Remember, the government's parliamentary majority was shaken after 42 ministers walked out to sit as independent members in the House.
I must remind you that President was voted to power by 6.9 million voters. We as a government state our policy. This is it. The President need not resign.
Facing a series of setbacks, Rajapaksa revoked the emergency rule ordinance that went into effect last Friday. A gazette was issued late on Tuesday. The move was clearly aimed at avoiding a vote on the extraordinary laws in the parliament. The revocation comes as a sudden move as the ratification by the parliament was due on Thursday and the Sri Lankan government is currently on the edge. In terms of numbers and the majority, Gotabaya Rajapaksa's once powerful ruling coalition is in turmoil after a string of defections. Dozens of lawmakers have walked out of the ruling coalition. Secondly, the emergency law had zero effect on the protesting citizens. Despite the state of emergency, protesters continued to rally across the nation. The order, in fact, only added to their resentment. Speaking of international pressure, the UN Human Rights Council also said it was closely watching the worsening situation in Sri Lanka. Unprecedented shortages of food and fuel, along with record inflation and blackouts, inflicted widespread misery. The shortages are essentially triggered by a lack of foreign exchange for imports. The crisis is worsening ahead of crucial talks scheduled with the International Monetary Fund for a loan program. Public unrest has surged over the ruling family's handling of the debt-heavy economy. Street demonstrations that began last month have intensified in recent days. During the 5-day period, more than 60 people have been arrested in connection with the unrest. Dozens of protesters gathered near the residence of the Prime Minister in the capital. University students chanted anti-government slogans and waved placards calling on the country's president to, quote-unquote, go home. The Sri Lankan doctor said they will be holding a street protest in Colombo as hospitals have run out of essential drugs.
And I'm here because it's not enough to just reshuffle the cabinet. We want accountability. It's not just resignation that we want. We want people to take accountability for their actions. We want these leaders to take accountability for their actions.
Our correspondent on the ground, Soni Athoda, has been tracking those developments and the protests. She sent us this report from Colombo. Take a look.
Despite nationwide calls requesting the president to step down, Sri Lanka's President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has refused to resign, while the parliament entered into its first day of discussions to look at how best Sri Lanka can overcome its ongoing economic crisis. Nevertheless, the proceedings in parliament were quite lackluster, given that no party or parliamentarian was able to come up with a strategy or plan to come out of this reeling economic crisis. Now, to add to matters, Sri Lanka's currency, the Sri Lankan rupee, has now been labelled as the world's worst performing currency, while people in Sri Lanka continue to stage protests, with health workers joining in today to voice their dissatisfaction over the government, which has resulted in depleting medical supplies and drugs. Reporting for WION World is one from Colombo. I'm Dasani Athauda.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.